We've now come to the fifth and final part of my series on the 5 aspects of your story's plot, the resolution. This is where you leave your reader satisfied and contented. But there's more to the resolution than your story saying goodbye. Time for another of my little tales. A man sits alone in his house and stared at a single candle on a cake signifying his 50th birthday. With no children or other family members to share his special day with, he found the day to be less of a joy than it might have been had he loved ones and friends to celebrate it with. Instead, all he was able to do was reflect on the events that had taken place since his last birthday. Mm, that was a birthday to remember. Although he hadn't any children and hadn't made any friends since moving to the new city, he had his wife, the woman who meant more to him than anything he could imagine. They had met 20 years to the day. He was out with a couple of his workmates at a local bar for his birthday when he noticed her having a drink with a couple of her own friends. By the time he had conjured up enough courage to walk over and speak with her, she had finished her drink and was patiently waiting for him to see that she was interested in more than the odd casual glance across the room. They hit it off brilliantly, and it seemed as though they were truly meant for one another. Less than 1 year later, they were wed. 2 years after that, and they packed up and moved away to a small town. For the next several years, they lived a life full of love and happiness. Then one day, Lenora took ill. At first, they thought it just the flu or something, but after several tests, they found out that she was suffering from a rare disorder, and since there was no cure, she would eventually succumb to it. Knowing that they would have at least a few years left together, they made the most of them by doing all the things that they earlier talked about. It was on her 46th birthday that they both knew would be her last. After seeing her birthday cake with one candle set down on the table in front of her, she made a wish and blew it out. The next few days were the hardest, and except for needing to take care of the day-to-day household chores, Clayton never left her side. She passed away 7 weeks later. On the day of her death, he wanted to die with her, having absolutely no reason to live without her. Now, on his birthday, he sat staring at his single candle on his birthday cake with no desire to blow it out. About a week had passed when he heard a knock at his door. This was strange since no one, since the passing of his wife, bothered to visit, and not at such a late hour. After opening the door, he saw a man in a hat and dark clothing standing on his porch. "I need to show you something," said the man. Normally, he would have just closed the door and gone back to reading his book. But there was something mysterious about this man. So he went with him. Outside, there was a large gray van, and with a curious stare, Clayton followed the man inside. "In front of us," began the man, "you can see 4 doors. They each lead somewhere. The first door, if you take it, would take you back 50 years into your past, where you would be made to relive your life from your current age. The second door, if you take it, will take you back 50 years into your past where you would be made to relive your life, but from the age of a newborn. In other words, you would start your life all over again. The third door, if you take it, would take you to your immediate death. The fourth door, if you take it, goes only to one place. I cannot tell you where or when that might be because I do not know. What I can tell you is that you will remain at your present age, but you will no longer have your memories. You will not remember anything that has occurred over your previous 50 years, nor will you remember even your own name. You do not have to choose today. It could be tomorrow, next year, or many years from today. In fact, these doors are mere symbols. You merely need to make a wish and your choice will be granted. Clayton thought for a short moment and then smiled. I know exactly which door I will choose, he said. Today I'll talk about the importance of your ending. And at the ending of this video, I'll tell you which door Clayton chose. As I stated in the previous video, part 4, the falling action, it is directly followed by the resolution. The falling action is the transitionary period that leads to the resolution. It takes the action from the highest point, the climax, and decreases the conflict and tension to allow the story to ease into the resolution. This is primarily because the nearer they get to their ending, where it all needs to come together, the more they tend to struggle to not only keep that level of intensity going, but continually raise that level through the rising action with the climax only so many pages away. In other words, they try so hard to bring it all together by the time they've reached the climax, they end up focusing too much on getting it right. So, the ending, the place where they need to tie up all their loose ends, the place where they need to resolve whatever issues they have created for their protagonist, and do it in a way that leaves their reader with a sense of satisfaction, can be, well, the most difficult part of any novel. Some writers write their ending first for this very reason. Realizing how difficult it is to adapt an ending to fit the rest of a story, they write a great ending and then take the time needed to allow their story to conform to it. It's a good strategy, and for some, works well. Technically, this style is called a frame story. I would have probably named it story that starts at the end and the rest follows later, but I guess theirs is shorter. Sometimes it's easier to write to an existing ending than to create one based off the story you are writing. Do you remember the movie Forrest Gump? This is a prime example of a story that begins at the end and then through the protagonist's retelling of his life through flashbacks, the story leads up to the ending. Another example is the classic novel Double Indemnity. If you don't know the story, a woman convinces an insurance salesman to help her do away with her husband so she can collect on the insurance she will take out on him. Let's just say all doesn't exactly go as planned. But my reason for bringing up this particular story is that it starts off after the plan goes wrong. In other words, it begins at the end with the insurance salesman recounting the events that led up to his current predicament. Then the story jumps to the beginning, 1 year earlier, when the protagonist, the insurance man, first meets the antagonist, the woman who wants her husband dead. This is a great example of the resolution because although the reader doesn't know it at the time, the protagonist is tying up loose ends and bringing a satisfying end to the story. It's also worth saying this is also a great example of the exposition. In my first video of this series, The Exposition, I explained that it is the backstory and usually presented at the start of your story to give your reader a little background. But if you remember, I also said it isn't always delivered at the beginning. Double Indemnity is a good example because the entire story is the exposition. The main character is recounting everything that took place from the beginning to the end of the story, but he is telling it from a time after it has taken place. It's through his narration that takes us from the beginning of the story back to the end that we truly understand the ending. The reason why the ending is so crucial to a story is because without a good ending, it's as if the entire story was a waste of time. It's important to recognize the fact that the climax and the falling action is a prelude to the ending and contribute to the ending. Have you ever read a novel or watched a movie that you found yourself really enjoying only to be disappointed by its ending? At that moment, it really didn't matter how much you had been enjoying the story. Your last impression was less than satisfying, and that is what you will remember. Believe it or not, the classic Romeo and Juliet is one of those stories with a less than satisfying ending. As a love story, which this is, readers love happy endings. They want to see the boy get the girl. They want to know that she found Mr. Right. They want to see the happy couple ride off into the sunset. What they don't want is for the couple who, against all odds, have a level of love for one another that can't be broken, only to watch that love be the downfall of them both. In this story, it is filled with conflict. But the conflict isn't really theirs. It is that of their feuding parents who don't want the two children to continue this relationship. You heard me. And I call them children because Juliet was only 12 when she and Romeo began their romance. Ultimately, that feuding led to their deaths. There was a resolution, but it was for the parents. The tragic death ended the relationship neither set of parents wanted. It is the most tragic of all love stories, but leaves the reader very much unsatisfied. A good ending makes for a memorable story. As a matter of fact, you could have a mediocre story, but if you end it well, your reader will be satisfied. This is a case where the end can justify the means. If we use my earlier video on falling action, in the example of the couple engaging in sex, if after they were finished and during the falling action, she was tidying up the bed and making plans to get him out of the house before her husband arrived home, when the door to the bedroom was opened and her young daughter, with a slice of pizza in her hand, stood in the doorway with her mouth open and tears filling her eyes, obviously has caught her mother doing something wrong. The end. Because this is the ending of this story, it is a bad ending that leaves the reader dissatisfied. A child has been emotionally scarred for life. And for a few minutes, give or take, of wanton sex, several lives have been affected. For the college girl story, once she escapes to freedom, if by the time she gets back to the forest where she had earlier hidden her sister, only to discover that her sister has been killed by a fourth captor that she didn't know about, it is a bad ending. And again, your reader is dissatisfied. Your reader wants a happy ending, and although it isn't always possible to give that happy ending to them, when you don't, there needs to be a good reason not to. Just simply having that little girl catch Mummy in the act for no other reason than to hurt the little girl makes for a bad ending. Having the college girl's sister murdered for no apparent reason but to hurt the college girl, making her victory of escaping less than worthwhile, makes for a bad ending. There must be a reason for your ending that ties your story together. Your ending is the culmination of everything that took place before it. It helps your reader to make sense of your story. The ending of your story is so crucial. You can't just end it whenever and wherever you feel like it without any regard for how it affects all the work you've done up until that moment. In the case of the woman caught by her little girl, maybe the strange man in the room with Mummy isn't just a strange man after all. Hmm. Maybe he's the little girl's biological father, and after finding this out, this being some of the loose ends that are tied up during the ending, the little girl is happy to know that the terrible man who she thought was her father all along isn't after all, and she now has a chance to have a father figure she never had before. This allows you to end your story in a more satisfying way. And as for the college girl, finding her sister dead, she might discover that she isn't really her sister after all, but the sister to the four brothers that had held her in that cellar. Now, finding her dead after knowing that she set her brothers after her because she blamed her for stealing her boyfriend would feel more like justice for the college girl and a loose end tied up, allowing for a satisfying ending. Like I've said before, endings can be difficult. An ending is where you bring your story to a close, but it's so much more than that. Think of getting ready to go to an important event. If you're a man, you shave, shower, put on your tux. If you're a woman, you get your hair and nails done at the salon. You shower and put on your one of a kind designer dress. Then, just as the two of you are about to go through the door to an awaiting limousine, you each slip on a pair of sneakers. The sneakers, being your ending, have already ruined your outfit. It doesn't matter that the woman had spent hours in the salon and then put on such an exquisite dress. Those sneakers are all that anyone will be noticing. Those sneakers are what defines your outfit, your ending, having relatively the same effect on your story. It doesn't matter how much preparation went into forming your plot. It doesn't matter how good your characters are, and it doesn't matter how well your story moved toward the climax. If you don't have a good closing, then, like the sneakers as part of your formal outfit, you have ruined any hopes of achieving that satisfying ending that your reader has spent the last few hundred pages anticipating. And now I'll tell you the ending of the story I call When One Door Closes, Another is Waiting. Although Clayton didn't want to relive his past 50 years from his current age or live his life over again as a child, and although he had contemplated taking his own life, even door number 3 wasn't agreeable. But he knew as soon as he laid eyes on that 4th door that he was going to choose it. You see, he suddenly remembered where he had seen the mysterious man before. He had just arrived home from running a few errands when he noticed a man get into a dark van and drive off just as Lenora, his wife, headed back into the house. And the reason he knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he would choose the 4th door was because of something his wife whispered to him as she laid there with death only moments away. She told him no matter how tempting, choose the 4th door. I'll be waiting there for you. He figured that by choosing the 4th door, even though he would have no memories of who he or his wife Lenora is, if they were able to find love the first time, who's to say they wouldn't be able to find it again? So, when he got back inside, he made a wish and blew out his candle. Thanks for watching, and if you found anything that I said beneficial to you in any way, hit that subscribe button because you never know, my next video might just be helpful too.